Now, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, NGE, has expressed deep concern over the relentless targeting and killing of journalists in Gaza. 5 journalists died in the latest round of killings by the Israeli Defense Force IDF. The NGE says the heinous acts are a blatant breach of international law, specifically the Geneva Conventions and additional protocol, which provide for the protection of journalists covering wars. While the Guild is demanding an immediate cessation of the targeting and killing of journalists in Gaza and other parts of the world, as well as an end to the war in Gaza. The Guild says it stands with journalists facing intimidation in Nigeria and will continue to advocate the protection of journalists and press freedom. Veteran broadcast journalist Peter Okwoche and Secretary of the Nigeria Guild of Editors, Dr. Uwugiaren, both join me on Arise Prime Time to discuss this important matter. Gentlemen, glad to have you join me.
Thanks for having us, indeed.
Let me start with you. 28 years in broadcast industry, 16 of those with BBC. What do you make of what you and the world, and myself inclusive, are witnessing in Gaza, especially concerning the killing of journalists like I just reeled out a while ago?
So I think it's, as a journalist, quite harrowing. There's a mantra I have: journalists are not criminals. You know, we're just storytellers. We tell the story as it is. You know, I know with the advent of citizen journalists now, you know, the news can be skewed. But even with mainstream media houses, they skew the news. If you go to America, you've got the
Fox.
You know, Fox, you know who they support, you know CNN who they support. But journalists are not criminals. Our job is to tell a story in its entirety. And I don't think you should be killed for selling hot dogs. You know, I shouldn't be killed for doing my job.
Yeah, Yobosa, killing of 5 more Palestinian journalists in Gaza by Israeli forces. Total killed since the war, 247. It should shock the world into action. The UN Human Rights Office said this on Tuesday. Why is the world not shocked, really?
Well, very sad, I must say. Like we stated in our statement this afternoon, the killing of journalists in Gaza is unacceptable. Like my colleague said, journalists are not criminal. We're not party to the crisis. We're not party to the conflict that is happening in Gaza. Our job, our mandate is to report what is happening there. You know, provide the general public, the world, with unfolding event in Gaza, and that's exactly what journalists have been doing. Now, to begin to target journalists in the conflict or in the war, ongoing war in Gaza, for us as Nigerian Guild of Editors is unacceptable. Now, if you look at the Committee to Protect Journalists report, you know, they've documented that in the since the war started in Gaza, about 197 journalists have been killed. Journalists and media workers have been killed in Gaza. For us, that is frightening. You know, apart from the humanitarian crisis that the war has created in Gaza, today we have a situation where hospitals no longer have drugs to treat victims. There is food insecurity. There's water crisis. And even in the hospitals where victims are being treated are not being targeted. As if that is not enough, we are now seeing a situation where journalists have been targeted. For us, is unacceptable. And like you said, our responsibility, our mandate is to tell the stories.
As it is.
You know, so we are not party to the crisis. I think this is something that the global community should respond to. The UN should also respond to.
Can I just say, you know, add something to what he's saying as well? Yeah. That, you know, it's, you know, as human beings, it's very easy for us to point fingers, you know. So all of us are here pointing fingers at Gaza and what's happening there, you know. But if you bring it back closer home, you know, at the moment, there are 4 Nigerian journalists, investigative journalists, who are in prison under some charges of cybercrime because they're investigative journalists. If you look across the whole of Africa, there are 16 journalists at the moment who are in prison. Nigeria, Tunisia, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, right? If you look at it, in the last, since 2023, if I'm not wrong, 16 journalists have been killed in the line of duty. You know, Sudan, 6 in Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, then 14 extrajudicial killings. These are journalists who, one of them was just waking up from his house and was shot through the window.
Would you say that journalists have become endangered species?
Oh, we are an endangered species. Let's not make any mistake about that. We are an endangered species. You know, people don't like the fact that I mean, if you're doing something wrong, you don't want anybody to report it. You know, I'm not going to go into who's right and who's wrong and what's happening in Gaza. We all can see it. You don't need Peter Okwoche to tell you who's right and who's wrong. What happened on October 7, 2023, everybody condemned it. But then 2 years on, you have to condemn what's happening. If you're not talking about the 200 and you said 247, my number is more like 270 journalists who've been killed in Gaza
Since the war
started.
7th.
If you're not talking about that, what about the over 30,000 children who've been killed or maimed?
Yeah.
And then the question of humanitarian. Now, Uwugiaren, targeting journalists as well as hospitals is actually forbidding under international law. I'm right?
Absolutely.
Why does Israel's case seem different?
Well, like you said, I think in these kind of situations, I think both parties are not concerned about who is right and who is wrong. And at the end of the day, it's about you and I. I mean, both parties are engaged in war. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's senseless. You know, in a situation where you have, somebody was talking about, I mean, for example, the International Federation of Journalists documented that about 297 journalists has been killed since the war started. And that is, I'm quoting the International Federation of Journalists. So the humanitarian crisis there, in a situation where you are not targeting children, you know, people who are admitted in the hospitals, of what use is that kind of war? It's for them, as far as I'm concerned, it's senseless. And I must say here that it is what is happening there is a failure on the leadership of the United Nations, because their inability to intervene and stop what is happening in Gaza is for me is very unfortunate.
I think what we've done now basically is to basically override international law and look at interests, national interest, overriding international law. Because this is a war that is going on. It's probably the most documented war in human history. You know, it's online, it's on TV, it's on radio, it's on social media, but we're not talking about it. You know, we're talking about October 7th, which, as I said, was a criminal offense.
But
2 years down the line, you know, why are we not talking about what's happening?
Well, initially the report said it was 2 strikes, but it's been confirmed now it's actually 3. One, what you call a double tap. Now, IDF says the strike targeted alleged Hamas camera without providing evidence. I mean, what do you make of that?
Let me explain that double tap. Let me explain that double tap to what a double tap means to your audience, to your viewers, right? So it used to happen in Iraq a lot during the Iraqi war, you know, when Iraq and Iran and then, you know, the Western invasion of Iraq. So what happens is you plant a bomb, you know, you detonate it, and then people rush to come and see what's happening, and you detonate the second one. That's what a double tap is. It happened in Abuja here. I think it was in 2010 during the 50th independence anniversary.
Where Jonathan was
at Eagle Square.
Yeah.
I was there. I was right there.
We're also
you
there.
know, and you know, the first bomb blast at Eagle Square drew people, and then the second one killed people. That's what a double tap is. It's intentional. It's not a mistake.
It's not, so it's intentional.
It is intentional.
And this is a place where it's recorded that journalists actually stay to report the news.
But let us also look at the conspiracy theories. Some people are also, you know, canvassing, and that because journalists, some journalists have been seen to be taking side in reporting war, and the journalists are no longer fair. They are taking side, and so the enemies are also attacking. If you are not with us, so there's need for us to also target you. I think that is part of that. I mean, that's conspiracy theory. So it might also be right if you look at it from that angle. But we all know in reporting war, as far as journalists is concerned, we're not interested. I mean, most journalists are not interested in solving the problem. They are only reporting the casualties, you know, focusing on casualties, focusing on the humanitarian crisis, and that's
The story
exactly
itself,
the story
what is happening.
So,
I mean,
when a party to the crisis is not comfortable with that, so there's a tendency to also target the journalist who is not reporting what is favorable to a party, to the crisis. So I think that might be part of the problem. Like we all said here, journalists are not party to the crisis, So I think when they are also fighting their war, they should also find a way to also, separate journalists from their enemies, because we are not part of the enemies.
whether they do that is another thing. They should do that. But journalists in conflict or war zones, Peter, require specialized insurance covering medical needs, disability, and accidental death. Have the media organizations emphasized this enough?
So I'll tell you, from my own personal experience, I know that where I was working before, I left the BBC 2 years ago, you had to go for hostile environment training every 3 years. If you missed that deadline of 3 years, you had to do like a 5-day course. Every 3 years is like a 3-year course, So you go there, they teach you, they put you in a bush, simulate events for you. I know that some media houses do it here because the BBC used to help them do it, but I don't think we do it enough. I don't think we have enough bulletproof vests or bulletproof helmets for our people. It's a lesson that all of us should learn. I would never, I've covered not wars, volatile,
maybe conflict.
Yeah, volatile
Conflict
areas
zones,
and all that. The last one I went to was just at the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I didn't go to Ukraine, but I was on the border between Poland and Ukraine when Africans were trying to cross and they were being stopped at the Ukraine border. But you had to go there with your bulletproof vest, with your helmet in case anything happened, and then you're fully insured.
Yeah, before I let you guys leave, what's of the question of insurance? You want to talk about that? Just briefly.
Well, let me say that as far as we are concerned, I'm talking to Nigerian Guild of Editors. Those are the issues that we've been trying to address. Within the media sectors. If you look at the country today, within the situation we find ourselves, Nigerian media we are not operating in a very favorable environment. So many media houses are in distress, and as a result of that, many of them are not able to meet this requirement that you're talking about insurance, about equipping journalists with the necessary
Is that enough reason?
Well, the state of the media created by the suffocating economic environment that we find ourselves in the country. So it's not just the media. Virtually all the sectors are affected. So the media is also affected. So because of that, they lack the capacity to provide this necessary incentive for journalists to do their job.
But you must keep fighting so that they can get it. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Okwoche and Iyobosa Uwugiaren, former secretary of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, and of course, veteran journalist Peter Okwoche. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here to discuss these issues about journalists and journalism. Good to have you.
Much appreciated.
All right, well, that's it for this edition of Arise Primetime. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.